Hello, everyone. As part of our work with the tidyverse, we're going to take a look first at the one of the probably the most useful parts of the tidyverse. Well, useful for us right now, and that's ggplot. Our work with ggplot will not be completely new to us since we did a little bit of work with it last term. But we're going to dig into it a little bit more deeply, and we're going to take a little closer look at some of the things that are available to us using this part of the tidyverse. Now, you can download ggplot and you can install it and do all of the stuff we're going to do. But because we're actually looking at the tidyverse, one of the first things we're going to do is we're actually going to load up the tidyverse. So there's my command to load up the tidyverse. And then I run a dimension command along with ggplot. Whenever you load ggplot or the tidyverse, it brings along this data set called MPG, which is miles per gallon. It was assembled years ago, and it just comes along with ggplot, so you can actually work with it and play with it. And it's a pretty common thing that people use in textbooks and stuff, just because it's part of R. So we take a look at it and run a dimension on it, and we can actually do that right now. I'm in this chunk of code, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Insert. Not Insert, I'm sorry, just click on Run, and we'll run the current chunk, which I could also do with the Control-Shift-Enter. It's loading up the tidyverse, and it's giving me my dimensions, and I have 234 rows by 11 columns. Okay. So now that I have a data set loaded, we're going to take a look at ggplot2. Actually, ggplot is the command that we'll use the most. It's a key part of the tidyverse, and it's basically the visualization engine. So we can learn a lot about our data, help plan our analysis, and then when we're ready, we can go ahead and display what we've learned. So we're going to run through a couple of ggplots for practice, and then I'm going to turn you loose on your assignment. I'm giving you a lot of materials on ggplot, so take a look at those. But out of a textbook that I'm using, I'm going to give you a number of practice assignments. Actually, I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you to come up with something on your own. I'll explain more about that actually in the assignment. So anyway, let's take a look at the ggplots, a couple of ggplots. Now, one thing to remember is that ggplot is got multi-layers. And so there's a foundation where it's just ggplot. It's just the command. And what you're basically saying is, okay, we're going to plot something. We could use multiple different formats, and we could use multiple different aesthetics. But first things first, we're going to plot something. And what we're going to plot is going to be the MPG data set. And that's the first thing. It's a bare minimum of what you need. And if we were to actually set up something like this with a ggplot of just the MPG data set, and we were to run that code, it gives us a ggplot, but there's nothing there. There's nothing there because we didn't specify the mappings and we didn't specify the aesthetics. We just specified the data, which is workable. It works, but it's not going to give us very much. So the next layers that we have to put on are things like mapping, things like the aesthetics, and with the mapping and the aesthetics, we can specify what exactly it is that we want to plot. So we'll specify three things actually. The first one's going to be the plot type. Second, there's going to be the mappings, and in the mappings, we'll specify the aesthetics for this to be useful. Let's go down and take a look at the command, an actual command, so that we can see the different parts. So we've specified ggplot, MPG, just like we did before, but now we're adding layers. And for each layer that we add, we use a plus sign. So in addition to just plotting ggplot, MPG, now we're going to say, add to this three things that are key. The first one is the type of geom that we are going to use. Geom underscore point is a scatter plot. We could also do geom underscore box plot, geom underscore histogram. There are many different kinds, and they're specified out in the cheat sheet that I gave you access to in the module. So once we specify geom point, now we have to specify, okay, what exactly are you going to build into your scatter plot, and how are you going to map all that out? So that's where the mapping part comes in. So mapping is going to be set equal to, or equal to, I should say, the aesthetics. And the aesthetics is where we really display or decide what things are going to look like. So I picked two fields. These are fields that are, of the 11 fields that are in the NPG data set, these are two of them. This one of them is the DISPL field, and the second one is the highway. So for X, my X-axis is going to be set to the DISPL field, and my Y-axis is going to be set to the highway or HWY field. And that's where I'm specifying my aesthetics that make up the mapping that is part of the geom point that is part of my plot. Okay. So when I get ready to run this, I get a plot. You see down here, I've got my X-axis with the field that I specified. my y-axis with the field that I specified as well, and then each of the values are scatter plotted across my geom point plot. Okay. In general, the format for a ggplot is we'll say ggplot, which is the command, data equals whatever data set you're going to be using, and then that is connected with a plus sign to whatever function we're going to be using, whatever geom function. In our case, it was geom point. And then that is also next to its mappings. And the mappings specify the aesthetics and whatever mappings we're going to use. Okay. There are two exceptions to this. There are actually more, but I'm only going to go through two. One, you don't have to specify this part data equals. You can just do ggplot and then whatever your data set is. That's what I did up here. I just did ggplot mpg. I didn't have the data equals mpg. And the second thing is you can put it all on one line. So you don't have to. Many times when you see ggplot used, you'll see it split up into multiple lines, and that's the case here. So I've got ggplot, I've got my data, then I've got a plus sign. Plus sign has to go at the end of the line. If you're going to split it to multiple lines, the plus sign goes at the end of the line, not at the beginning of the next line. That will cause an error. So you can put it into multiple lines separated by plus signs, and sometimes there's multiple levels. So you have plus sign, and then another line, and plus sign, and then another line, in trying to determine exactly how you want your plot to look. So first thing is, like I said, you don't have to have this data equals. And the second thing is you can put everything on one line. I oftentimes will do that. So it could look something like this. Let's see, down here, right? You have ggplot, my data, plus the geom function, and then the mapping equals whatever my mappings are. And then one last note there, if you split it into two lines, the plus sign must be at the end of the line, not at the start of the new line. But that plot gives us a pretty flat, black kind of, I mean, it works, it's functional, but there's so much more that we can do with this. So there's a couple things we can do, and these all come down to how we set things up in the aesthetics section. Okay? So we could use things like the field class. In our data set, unbeknownst to us, because I haven't mentioned it, but in the MPG data set, there are 7 classes of cars. So what if we wanted to separate out these data points to look at the different classes and see how they plot on the two variables that we've chosen? And we can do that by specifying specific aesthetics and setting that equal to the value of one of the classes. So we'll go ahead and do that in the first one. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set, in this particular case, we're going to use a class field in all 3 examples because, like I said, there are 7 classes. And we're going to separate it out using different functions. In this particular case, we're going to use color. So we want to say for every class, give it a different color. And that's what we're doing here in this particular chunk. And that's what we get. Over here on the left or the right hand side, we've got the different sort of the legend of what the different colors mean. And then all of the data points are separated out by class. The next example that we're going to use is separating out. In this case, we're going to use class again, but what we're going to do is we're going to specify the size of the point, and the size of the point is going to differ by class. And so we get 2-seater, compact, midsize, and we see different points. Okay, it gives us a warning message. And the warning message basically says using size for a discrete variable is not advised. And the reason why is because it's kind of hard to tell the difference between when you get to like mid-size minivan and pickup, kind of hard to tell the difference. So that's one where we can use it if we have maybe smaller numbers of classes, but it's not particularly useful when we get too many classes. And the last example I'm going to show you, in this particular case, we're going to change, instead of changing the color or the size based on class, we're going to change the shape of the point. In a scatter plot and many other plots, R supports many different formats. It can be plus signs, X's, all kinds of squares. You just have to decide what shape you want. So in this particular case, it's going to decide for us, and it's going to take each class and assign it a different shape. So we'll go ahead and run that section. And we get different shapes. You can see plus signs, you can see asterisks, you can see little squares, but we also get more error messages or warning messages. And the most important warning message that you need to be aware of is that when you use shape in a ggplot, it will only allow you to have 6 different classes or 6 different discrete values. That's a problem for us because we have 7 classes. So if you look over here on the legend, you see SUV blank. It's not even accounted for. And there are 62 records that were SUVs, and so they just got dropped off of the plot. So again, there are limitations for using size and shape. All right, that is a quick overview of the use of ggplot for scatter plots. What I'm going to do for your assignment is I'm going to give you a data set. It will probably be NPG, and I'm going to ask you to do some number of ggplots. Play around with it, be creative with it, use color, use shape, use whatever you want to use. But it's going to require you to sort of dig in a little bit to ggplot and become more familiar with it. And also, the cheat sheet that I gave you is enormously helpful. We'll give you all the parameters, all the specifications that you need. So if you have any questions, let me know.